Have you ever thought, oh, if only there were a video game where I could run around collecting balls of assorted yarn, and then turn those into hats, and in return those hats would give you inhuman superpowers? Well, that's remarkably specific and weird, but hey, dreamers gotta dream. And not to stir your dream cloud or anything, but you know that's not gonna happen, right? I don't want to be a stick in the mud, but the probability that someone, let alone a talented team of game developers, would devote time and resources into a game about collecting yarn and making superpower hats is just so inconceivably insignificant that you'd have to be, and it already exists. Hey there everyone, Ryeniken here, and welcome to today's review of A Hat in Time. Now let me just start by saying that this game is good. There are a few flaws and things to complain about, but overall the game is an enjoyable experience. So let's talk about that. But before we do, just to let you know, this review does contain spoilers. So if you want to play this game blind, know that it is a good game, probably worth your time, and stop here. Don't worry, this review isn't going anywhere. I can wait. We can see if you agree with me after you've beaten the game. So you boot the game up and it smacks ya. It smacks ya with some in-your-face charm. Like a loud smack in the face kind of charm. It ain't subtle. You start the game, get to know the controls, which are super easy to pick up, and get on with the game. However, this getting to know the controls phase does drag on for quite some time. It really doesn't feel like you actually start playing until you unlock your second area and get to actually make a choice in the game, which for me was at the 50-minute mark. It really feels like the game holds your hand for quite some time. This ain't no Dark Souls, that's for sure. But besides the hand holding, the overall feel is still fun. The first interactive enemies, the Mafia, have invulnerability mechanics, so you have to use a combination of abilities to beat up even the simplest of foes. After the 1 hour mark, the game gets more interesting. New paths open up and the game scales up in difficulty, albeit not enough to net me any unwarranted deaths. The game really has some lax, forgiving health mechanics, almost like Sonic. The health bubbles, they are everywhere. So there are very few instances that you'll ever find yourself running out of that. Expect to have a fairly smooth sailing throughout the game. There are definitely high and low marks of the game. Some areas are quite dull and boring. Particular missions are lackluster. However, and this is a big however, there are also amazing gems within the gameplay. Particularly the train stages, the boss fights, and the haunted house. Oh gosh, that haunted house. I am a grown-arse man, and it had me in a state of headphones off, looking away from the screen, saying, no thank you, after only one try. This puts games like Five Nights at Freddy's to shame in terms of scare factor, but alas, it is only for a single level, and to be honest, I like it that way. I think it's the fact that it's only a single level that makes it quite so horrifying. Overall though, this game kept me entertained. It looks and sounds appealing, the sound design in particular is great, to the point in which I am tempted to get the soundtrack. Almost. The only thing that took me out of the game was the clunky hat control mechanics. The right clicking and dragging isn't the first time I've seen this mechanic, but for a platformer, especially when I'm used to things like Super Mario Odyssey or Banjo-Kazooie controls, which uses a combination of buttons to activate something, this menu-oriented switch system just took me personally out of the game, and I even found switching to anything besides the sprint hat just a monotony. Now of course this could just be me and my big fat fingers, because over time this mechanic did start to feel a little more natural and I got used to it, but the game didn't exactly scale in difficulty with this newfound mastery of controls. There's a badge you can get from Mr. Glitchy over here, which makes it so you die in a single hit, spiking the difficulty to meh to whoa Nelly. But this requires significant grinding to get. You'd normally never find this amount of currency to actually get this badge on a regular playthrough. For a platformer, the combat was nearly non-existent, with the exceptions of the boss fights and these spiders, which were more annoying than anything. The boss fights were flashy, but simple. In fact, 2 of the primary boss fights had reskinned versions of the same attack. All of every attack is easily dodged, and this shouldn't present a problem to even the most mediocre of player. Heck, even the final battle was like this, but more on that later. So what's the solution to make these boss fights seem harder? Oh yeah, stretch them out. Each boss fight takes between 10 and, get this, 29 hits. You dodge attacks, wait for a vulnerable phase, and hit them. 29 times. How's that fun? It isn't. Particularly this fight, where the only thing that changes is the number of projectiles that come towards you. You don't lose these fights due to difficulty, but just by attrition. Well, that's enough about the bad. Let's talk a bit about the good. What's unique about this game? What could possibly redeem the obtuse difficulty scaling of this game? Well, let's start with the environments. Each area is uniquely crafted and not ultra generic. The actual flow of the game also differs depending on what level you're on. On Mafia Island, the game feels a bit like Super Mario Sunshine. On the train, it feels like a detective game. In the Spotlight, let's not talk about those. The final non-boss area you unlock has a free roam mechanic, where everything is hub central, and it feels so much like Banjo-Kazooie that it turns out to be a really good thing. However, due to the low number of collectibles in the game, 40 in total, instead of creating a compact area with lots to do, they instead create long, training islands with remarkably long, pointless transition scenes. I mean, look at this. Just look at it. This keeps going for 50 seconds. I get you're going for a reveal here, but this is ridiculous. Now, in terms of story and wit, this game easily dwarfs any other platformer. I fell in love with these characters, their flaws, their quirks, all of which are super appealing. I look at all the other reviews of this game, and this, above all else, seems the most likely place for those reviews to have given perfect marks. If you don't want to know how this story ends, I highly recommend you stop here, skip forward to this time code, as I'm going to talk specifically about the last level and final boss here. So if you don't want the story spoiled, please skip forwards to the next section labeled Results in the description below. Now, you can tell a lot about a game by its final stage, and if that game doesn't have one, by its endgame content. It just so happens that this game does, and oh boy, what a level it is. Unlike other levels, this is the end, so of course you only reasonably would have to play through it once. It is a good throwback to previous levels, with all of the characters we've met within the level itself, the main antagonist, the Mustache Girl, having stolen the hourglasses, reverted time, and deemed herself ruler and judge over all, literally the judgment bar between living and dying. You really do get to hate this person by the final level. Now, every good final level takes the mechanics that you've learned and makes you use them again in order to complete a series of tasks in order to get to the final boss. The level itself does this very well. The final boss fight, though, does not. Once again, like every other boss fight, it just involved putting on the sprint hat, dodging attacks, and hitting her 28 times. Yes, the last boss is actually the second most powerful enemy. At the halfway mark, though, there is a bit of a twist. She gets stronger and angrier, and you're given an almost permanent damage immunity through, get this, the characters killing themselves to give you heart points. Holy heck. Does this mean that every character you have defeated in this game has goals, ambitions, a craving not to die? Even the Mafia, whom I slaughtered in droves, seems self-aware of the inevitability of death. That is grim. Okay, spoilers over, you can come back now. In terms of replayability, once the main game is over, you can of course go back to collect any remaining hourglasses you did not get, as is normal in any platformer game such as this. However, A Hat in Time also has the additional benefit of open source player-made levels through their modding capabilities. This, in turn, can take a game that would have normally been the end, game over, want to play it all again, into a possibly endless scenario. And that summarizes the game. Let's get to the scores. Now, seeing as this is the first review of its kind, a trial per se, I'll sit this neatly in our #1 spot until it is dethroned by another review. Thank you so much for watching today's game review of The Hat in Time. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell because I'll be giving away a new game, Conan Exiles. That is a $50 game in the next video. I'm gonna hide the code somewhere in there, so having that bell ticked might just net you a $50 game. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!